You are now entering season 3 of Nick and Melo's Hyperspace.
My name's Nick, and my favorite arc of the Clone Wars is the Siege of Mandalore.
And I'm Carmelo, and I don't know if it's my favorite, but the one that really hits me, the arc that really hits me is the Battle of Umbara. I just didn't know that animation could do something that dramatic. It's just really incredible.
In our journeys through hyperspace, we examine everything and anything Star Wars from the point of view of two lifelong fans, one young and one old, who came together through the will of the Force.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Clone Wars. We are both gigantic fans of animated Star Wars, and in our very first season did a show on Rebels. And as we were putting season 3 together, we thought, I think it's time.
Yeah.
I think it's time to do
Long overdue.
A Clone Wars. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we are releasing it on the week that Clone Wars was released 15 years ago. Is it October 3rd of 2008?
October 3rd, first episode premiered. Yep.
So it's very exciting to be releasing this on the day of the anniversary at the beginning of our third season. So it's just I'm Carmelo's tickled. It's really quite fun.
This is the first thing when you said 15 years, it actually made me feel a little old. I was like, wow, I remember where I was when I first watched it. So it's
maybe we need to change the paragraph to one not so young, one old.
maybe so.
Not there yet.
Crazy to think it's been 15 years. That's mind blowing.
Nick, can you tell us about sort of like your first exposure or your first experience with Clone Wars?
Yeah,
we had very different ones.
We did. I was 13 years old when the Clone Wars came out, the movie, and then the show right after. I didn't see the movie in theaters, and at that point, I hadn't seen any Star Wars movie in theaters. I'd waited till they came on home release, DVD or VHS.
Right.
It was kind of my first time where I felt like I was a part of it because, like I said, I didn't get to go to the theater, so being there, watching the premiere and kind of keeping up with the show as it was coming out was kind of cool. I wasn't really the biggest fan though. I didn't hate it, but I knew Star Wars had ended at that point. I was kind of hoping for more movies. Like I said, I didn't really hate the show, but my younger brother watched it and I kind of watched it with him. He was kind of the target audience for the show. I was, like I said, 13, so I was a little older maybe. And first couple seasons, I was like, it's okay. Star Wars at least. And then maybe, I don't remember what point, but I guess it was third, maybe fourth season where I was like, oh, this show's really good. This is really cool. And I got really invested in it and looked at it in a whole different light. So yeah, this is an interesting journey. And I can't believe it's been 15 years since all that.
I know. I like you, I remember hearing about the release of the film, but not being interested enough to go see it. I was an adult. And I just sort of thought, well, maybe it's going to be a little too kiddie for me. And so I didn't go. I didn't start watching Clone Wars until it showed up on Netflix. When they released season 6 of Clone Wars, which was all on Netflix, they included all of the Clone Wars from the first five seasons. And I remember the time thinking, oh, I should give it a try. I don't remember what I saw first, but I remember being blown away. I remember starting to watch this and thinking, whoa, this is something, I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless about Clone Wars. I thought it was something that you would watch and then forget about it. And it was not. It really was not. I remember thinking, Nick, when I was watching probably season 3 or season 4, I was thinking, okay, this was what I was hoping the prequels were like. My issue with the prequels mostly, and it's a really interesting thing, is that it's so focused on Anakin that we forget the world of Star Wars. And I love Clone Wars because we get to understand the galaxy in ways we had not with the original trilogy. And so it was just marvelous seeing this whole world of Jedi, the Jedi Order, Coruscant, bounty hunters, clones, and sort of getting to know so much about them.
Mhm.
And so I quickly became very, very much enamored of the show once I started watching it. But I was very late. I was very late to it.
So I want to ask you this question because I know when we first met and we were becoming friends, you had mentioned that Ahsoka was your favorite character in all of Star Wars.
Yes.
Um, she took won your heart, and you've been a diehard since then. What point did she become your favorite character?
I did not watch the movie before watching the show.
Okay.
So even though we are introduced to Ahsoka in the movie, I did not know that movie until much later, until much, much later. I have probably seen 3 or 4 seasons of Clone Wars before. Um, I didn't have the typical arc of older males of finding Ahsoka annoying or anything like that. I always found her like a good antidote to Anakin.
Mm.
And so I always enjoyed her because because there were things that were similar to Anakin, like the impatience and the stubbornness of her. But there were other things that she was in a way sort of the conscience of Anakin, and I really liked that from the very beginning. I have never not liked her.
Right.
I have always I have always found her a fascinating character, and she is still my favorite character in Star Wars
That's interesting.
by far, by
Yeah.
far.
I love for her, but I didn't really dislike her either. She was just there.
Mhm.
But I remember my wife made this point when we watched Rebels. She felt like Ezra's journey was her first kind of full experience of somebody becoming a Jedi. Uh, she
Ah,
said, like, I watched the original trilogy, but to me, it was kind of happened so quick. We really didn't get to see all of Luke
right,
becoming a Jedi.
right,
They had to skip around and cut corners. She said, Ezra was the first one I felt like I got to watch become a Jedi. And I
right.
kind of felt that way with Ahsoka. She was the one I really got to watch. She was
Yes,
the first one I got to see grow as a character and become a
yes,
more competent Jedi. And I think, I rewatched a lot of the Clone Wars as Rebels was coming out, and we saw Ahsoka and Rex and other characters pop up. So I had to go revisit a lot of those episodes and forgot a lot of things. But seeing her in Rebels kind of made me like, wow, we really have spent a lot of time with her, and
oh
she has
yes,
grown, and not just physically, but like maturity. She's a whole different person. So
yes,
it's cool to see that journey
yes,
unfold.
yes. And it is interesting because I've seen it. I probably have seen Clone Wars like 4 times, maybe.
Hmm.
There are so many episodes that I have seen again and again and again. And because I teach the Star Wars class, there are some that I see every semester. So I don't know if it's really 4 times or more or less, but somewhere in there. But it's been just wonderful as I revisit the show, the different worlds that we get to see, the world of the bounty hunters, the world of pirates. Like we
Hmm.
didn't know about pirates before. And it's
Yeah.
so fun having pirates in Star Wars. I'm right now rewatching Resistance, and I'm really enjoying the pirates this time. In a way that at the beginning I just thought they felt like filler, and now this is the third time I watch Resistance, so it's really nice to see the pirates. But the pirates start in Clone Wars.
Hmm.
That's
Were
when we
they?
first get them.
Hmm.
Um, and as I said before, getting to see the whole Jedi Order and the mechanism of it and how it works, and the younglings and the Padawans and the Jedi Knights and the Jedi Masters, which is something that we sort of knew a little bit about in the prequel trilogy. But in Clone Wars, we get to go like build lightsabers
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Clone Wars. And so there's just so much that sort of fills in the blanks of so many things about Star Wars. And so I'm not only do I love the show, but I'm very grateful for the ability that the show had for letting us know how the world works.
I appreciated that as well. I appreciated kind of learning how Jedi became Jedi. Where do
Mm-hmm,
they come from? How do they
mm-hmm,
just determine who's a Jedi?
mm-hmm.
And I think that's why when we can talk about some our favorite characters, Plo Koon became one of my
Oh yeah.
interesting characters of the
Oh
show.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
had no speaking lines in the prequel films, but becomes a pretty important character in the Clone Wars, and very interesting and fascinating guy.
Plo Koon was Filoni's one of Filoni's favorite characters.
He was, yes.
So he certainly has speaking lines in Clone Wars.
He does. He does.
So it's really quite wonderful that he becomes a much more important person in it.
Yeah, and is a voiced by James Arnold Taylor, also the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
And I had no idea until you and I went to C2E2, and he did the voice, and I was like, oh, I never knew that.
Yes.
I never caught that. I don't know why, but I just never did. It was really cool.
Yeah, the only that's it's interesting. I had not thought about that. It's this is the show where we start getting some really established voice actors that are going to be with Star Wars for a very long time. And so it's we still have Bad Batch season 3 coming up. And so we have clones that have been there since the beginning in Clone Wars. And those voice actors are still around doing work for Star Wars. So it's really quite exciting. It's really quite exciting. That's fun too. You mentioned the Siege of Mandalore. Are there other moments in Clone Wars that you are particularly attached to?
Yeah, I think a few that stick out to me is anytime we get to spend time with clones. And I really have affinity for the clones. They're incredible. I really enjoy the Embar arc, even though it's heartbreaking. I enjoy that one.
Yeah.
One that I really enjoy. It's a two-parter. It's about a Domino Squad.
Oh yes,
when they're running through the training simulation and having to work as a team.
Yeah,
I just really love that one, and that's where we get introduced to a lot of the clones that everybody loves, Fives and Echo, and all kinds of people that would be in the 501st. And I enjoy some arcs with Ahsoka, especially her probably her most pivotal one, and the one where she leaves the Jedi Order is great. Just a lot of I feel like I've told people all the time, like, you could just jump in. You don't really need a whole lot of context. You can just jump in and watch 3 or 4 episodes, and that's all you really need to know. It's a really good about kind of being much in a much larger world, but also being self-contained at the same time.
Yes,
it's an easy entry point, I think, for a lot of people that want to get into Star Wars animation or maybe just want to get into Star Wars TV. It's an easy point to just jump in, find something you enjoy, and just kind of watch that.
I have, in my multiple viewings, I have really enjoyed many of the ones with Padme. Because it's really fun to see other facets of her as a senator. And almost like a spy. She does a lot of espionage.
She does.
In a lot of the things. So it's there's a little bit of a Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie in Padme that I really enjoy. I just really love those. You mentioned clones. When I was writing my book, after I had finished the manuscript, I found this wonderful quote from Filoni saying that veterans were really attracted to clones because in Star Wars, the stormtroopers, the soldiers, are bad. They're the baddies. And so one of the things that many veterans really appreciate about Clone Wars is that these soldiers, setting aside Order 66,
yes,
these soldiers are good. These are the righteous soldiers doing the right thing. And so it's really quite wonderful to have the galaxy far, far away that is so much focused on war, having soldiers that are not the bad guys, that these are the actual good guys. And I found it really interesting that I am not a veteran, so this is not something that I relate to, but it was really quite wonderful and quite touching to realize that Star Wars fans who are veterans are very much attracted to the clones because of that righteousness, really cool. In the way that they are presented in the show. And that's nice.
That is really nice. I could see the appeal too. They're way more humanized in this show than they ever were in the prequels. And I think it was brilliant just from an animated standpoint. Besides, they all have the same face, but giving them distinct personalities, shaved heads, tattoos, slightly different color hair. I mean, it's it's brilliant.
And even the way they paint like their helmets, they do things to their
right,
helmets. So
right. It's
so you
just a
can
brilliant way.
sort of these that's really quite wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think everybody has their favorite clone, and you could probably ask 10 people, they may give you 10 different answers.
Probably.
That's how awesome they are.
No, the clones are something very special.
Yeah.
They really are something very special, and their episodes are really quite great. When I teach my Star Wars class, the students are just in love with the clones. In love with the clones, even the ones that have never seen Clone Wars.
Interesting.
They start watching it and they're like, "Whoa, the clones! Let's talk about the clones."
Haley, first time we watched Clone Wars, we watched Rebels first, and then we watched Clone Wars because I was more of a fan of Rebels. But when we watched Clone Wars, or when we watched Rebels, she liked Rex and Wolf and Gregor. But then when we watched Clone Wars, she grew a greater appreciation for them. Mm-hmm. And in Clone Wars, every time a clone was about to die, she got mad. She would wince, and she's like, "Am I going to be mad at this episode?" Or the Umbara arc was a very difficult.
one. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to watch.
She was that was a rough one for her to get through.
Yeah.
She wanted to take out Prong Krell herself. So
he's a bully, and bullies make me very angry. So
another highlight one that I enjoy just because of I enjoy connections in Star Wars and things that show up later. Waxer and Boyle, when they are in Ryloth and they run into the little girl, Numa, and later in the Rebels, Cham Syndulla has a resistance of Twi'leks, and one of them is Numa, and she has their symbol on her shoulder blade, and it's really cool. I just enjoy that really small moment, but
I love that arc in Clone Wars where these two clones have to deal with this little girl. Yeah. I thought that was really quite wonderful. Really,
I think that's season 1 actually. If I'm not,
is that really?
It's very early.
Wow.
I think it's. Okay. I remember it being pretty early. I thought it was later.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a really good one about prejudice and overcoming. That was really cool.
No, it's a great one, and it's one of the things that I loved about Clone Wars, and why I kept mentioning it in my book, because this is the first really long arc of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. We had the original trilogy, we had the prequel trilogy, but this is the time where, on a weekly basis
for years
between 2008 and 2020, not every week, but you could catch my drift. Mm-hmm. We get this really beautiful, long, detailed arc of what it means to live in the galaxy, but also what it means to live at war. Mm-hmm. And how it affects all sorts of people, from senators to marginal people in the underworld of Coruscant, to planets that are in the Outer Rim, to the soldiers, to just everybody. And I love that we are allowed to see all of that. It just makes the world richer.
One thing I want to talk about briefly is last few years we've gotten a lot of great books that take place during the Clone Wars, at the start of the Clone Wars, and they've kind of shed some new light, and it made me think about some of the older episodes. And two that I want to point out: one I'm currently reading, Rise of the Red Blade, and Brotherhood by Mike Chen, which is the Obi-Wan and Anakin story.
Yes.
Those two books, they kind of really give me like a new perspective on how the Jedi were during that time. How, like, in those books they talk about a lot of Jedi are passing away, and like their numbers are depleting, and that comes to the point where they don't even have enough teachers to teach the children of the future. So they have to get people that may not be ready to be teachers teaching these people, or these young kids, and then having Jedi that are probably not ready to be a Jedi Knight, but they're at a necessity, they have to be. And I can't remember the Jedi's name. It's in one episode. I want to say it's the Lair of Grievous. Okay. It's Kit Fisto and clones and another Jedi who I always forget his name, but he's only in that one episode. But he's a newly Jedi Knight, and he messes up on the mission. It cost him his life. And it makes me think a lot, like, if he was matured and nurtured and given guidance like he was supposed to, that may not have happened.
Right.
And he was one of many Jedi that happened to, and kind of just a very sad time for Jedi in general, even though we get to see them do a lot of good for the galaxy in the Clone Wars. It just kind of makes the complexity of war more apparent than we get to see in the movies.
And you're right. It's really interesting how in recent times we've gotten quite a bit of fiction set during the Clone Wars. That's really quite nice. That's really quite nice. I recently read Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which is an older novel, but it's also set in the Clone Wars. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. I read it just because I was sort of curious. And I ended up really liking it as a wonderful Clone Wars novel. It's one that I highly, highly recommend. I'm actually adding it to the list of novels for my students to read in class. Cool. Because I think it's really quite nice. Nick, I think it would be really nice to talk a little bit about sort of the legacy. We've talked a little bit about it, but it would be really nice to sort of spend the last part of our episode talking a little bit about the legacy of Clone Wars, sort of like what it starts, what it triggers, what it creates, what it sort of opens the doors to. I don't know if you want to say a few things and then I'll
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little different. Because I came into Star Wars literally at the end of the prequel trilogy. Revenge of the Sith was the first movie I watched. So then I went back and watched all the films. But and then once I watched all the movies, I was like, man, that's it. That's all we got. And then once the Clone Wars came out, and I grew affinity for it. It was like, at the time, it was the only Star Wars coming out. Like now we're really blessed with all the different shows and movies and books and comics that we get.
Yeah, we're in a golden age.
Yeah, we're wealthy with Star Wars stories. Back then,
we're spoiled.
We were very spoiled. Back then, it was Clone Wars, really, for me, especially for somebody who didn't have a disposable income where I could go purchase books and comics. So for me, it's a fondness of sharing something with my brother that we really bonded over and really enjoyed as kids.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, it's set the stage for so much of what we watch now and so much of the content we have, not just the books that we've talked about, but TV series. Mandalorian heavily relies on what was set up in the Clone Wars. Yes. Bo-Katan's very big part of the Clone Wars.
Yes.
Book of Boba Fett, Cad Bane showing up. He's a very big part of the Clone Wars.
Right.
And of course, we wouldn't have Rebels or Bad Batch without what the Clone Wars set out to be. So it's not my favorite thing in Star Wars, but it's certainly, I respect it. And for a lot of people, it was kind of their introduction to Star Wars. Just like my younger brother and a lot of people his age, that was their Star Wars because that was on all the time, and it was what was new and what was happening.
For me, it was the introduction to animation, to Star Wars animation. Mm-hmm. They had done the Ewoks animated show in the 80s and the Droids show, but I never saw those. And so this is sort of a restart, like a rebooting of animated Star Wars that in a way is the stepping stone for Rebels. It's a stepping stone for Bad Batch. It's the stepping stone for Resistance. And so it's really quite wonderful to have Clone Wars as the beginning of an animated Star Wars legacy that continues to today. Like this is not stopped. They continue making Tales of the Jedi.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
Tales of the Jedi is like the grandchild of the Clone Wars. Right. The grandchild of the Clone Wars. And those were 6 marvelous episodes. 6 marvelous episodes. And so it's really, I'm sorry?
So they all look incredible too.
No, they're just amazing. But it all started with Clone Wars.
Right.
And so it's really wonderful, not only, as you say, sort of like this is the legacy for all the storytelling that's going to happen later, but it is also the legacy of animated Star Wars, of creating animation for telling stories in Star Wars. And, I know that starting with The Mandalorian, there's this whole idea about now everybody wants their animated characters to go into live action. They change. Something is different when you do live action. Telling stories in live action and telling stories in animation are really quite different. We could do a whole episode on that because it's just different storytelling. It really is different storytelling. And so I love that we have live action. Don't anybody who is listening get me wrong. But there is something different about telling stories in animation and Clone Wars figured it out.
Yeah.
Figured it out and then continued it on in Rebels and then later Bad Batch and something as recent as Tales of the Jedi. And so that's to me, that's a really important legacy. Really important legacy.
I have to agree. I don't think, me and my wife talk about it all the time. The things we talk about when we talk about Star Wars, it's usually Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch. That's our comfort stuff. That's the stuff we watch over and over. We'll occasionally watch a movie or some of the live action shows, but like those are where our favorite characters come from. That's where some of our favorite moments, like the moments that get me emotional most of the time are in animation.
This morning, in preparation for this, I watched the last 4 episodes of season 5 when Ahsoka is framed and then she leaves the order and all of that stuff. And I cried like a baby this morning. My eyes were red.
Such a good show.
I'm not going to cry now because I got over it, but I was so broken up and shaken up, emotionally shaken up by an animated show. And so it's really quite beautiful. I agree with you. When I go back to Star Wars here in my house, my tendency is to go to the animated shows.
Same here.
I some of the movies I adore, but I lean towards the animated shows. I really do. I want to point out something very quickly that I'm a music junkie, and Kevin Kiner has done the music for all of Clone Wars, for all of Rebels, all of Bad Batch. And I'm really happy that he's doing the music for the live action Ahsoka because it's his legacy. Yeah. He did all that music. He should be doing that. And I'm very happy that he's doing it. And so it's really quite wonderful also to have a legacy, a music legacy. When we think of music in Star Wars, we always think of John Williams, but I would like people to start thinking of Kevin Kiner as well. Yeah. Because he's done marvelous things, very different things from what John Williams does, but I think equally effective. The music for Order 66 in the last episodes of season 7, I listen to that music all the time. It's just so incredibly dramatic, and so well articulated to the sort of emotional conflicts of the many characters that are sort of going through Order 66 at the end of season 7. It just he's wonderful.
He's good.
I would like to meet him.
I would too.
There's some people that I don't really need to meet. Like I don't know what I would say to Filoni, sort of like thank you, but with Kevin Kiner, I could have a conversation. I could I would be. I have so many questions. Maybe we should get him. If we could get him on the show, that would be awesome.
Oh, that'd be fun. I will say
I'm not famous yet, so famous people don't talk to me yet.
I've been listening to the Bad Batch soundtracks, and man, I love them. They're so intense, and he's got a wide variety of like emotional moments, and then
it's beautiful.
Fun action. Yeah, Indiana Jones or 80s action movie kind of music too. That's so fun, and I constantly find myself humming the Bad Batch theme. And I just love that theme so much. That's one of my favorite things in all of Star Wars.
And I love the sort of dance music, like the club music that he creates for all the bars. It's just so much fun. It's just so
different. It's so cool.
Yes, it really is. It really is. So, Nick, any final thoughts as we wrap up our episode?
No, I mean, we covered pretty much most of it. I just want to gloat about how much I love this series and how much we love Star Wars animation and so many great characters, and we getting to see them expand to books and comics and now TV live action, and curious to see if when we'll see these characters again and in what form. I never really want to go away from them, but we'll see. Sometimes you have to.
Indeed.
Sometimes you have to.
I love how Clone Wars is almost like the kernel, and then from there all of these things sort of grow out. Because we had 5 seasons on Cartoon Network, 1 season on Netflix, 1 season on Disney Plus, you can really see the difference of how the show grows between ambush, the very first episode, to Order 66 and its aftermath in the end of season 7. So it is, it's 12 years of animation.
Yeah.
And so the show sort of grows with Star Wars, which I really like. Thank you, Nick. This was a great idea. This was Nick's idea of doing a show on Clone Wars. So thank you so much, because it is an important show, and the word legacy is an important word for Clone Wars. Clone Wars created a legacy of storytelling and a legacy of animation. So.
It really saved Star Wars in a lot of ways. Kept the fandom going when we didn't have anything else, and I think we'll never forget it because of that.
It created a new generation.
That too, yes.
A new generation of Star Wars fans. So, all right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
May the Force be with everybody.